Hello, everyone. I'm Nate Truex, and you're listening to the Croccast Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Croccast Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and today I'm joined by Lance Paden, who's currently working with the Turtle Survival Project. Lance, welcome to the show.
Hey, Nate. It's the Turtle Survival Alliance. It's a NGO that I'm working with currently. So yeah, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
And that's my pleasure. So, you want to get us started off with how you first got into herps and kind of your career path up to this point?
Sure. Herps have kind of been a big part of my life ever since I was probably 3-4 years old growing up. My dad was always a big fan of box turtles, so we kept quite a few box turtles in our backyard growing up. Rescued turtles on the road all the time was kind of a big hobby of mine and his when I was little. So that kind of got me started, and been keeping reptiles ever since then, pretty much. Various stages of my life have been more involved with turtles, and then lizards and monitors, and then back to turtles and tortoises, and now I'm more on the research side of things. Went into kind of the professional research career path, I guess you would say, after graduate school, and did my master's program at the University of Georgia. So yeah, that's kind of a brief intro.
Yeah. Did you work with any type of herp for your master's program?
Yeah, I worked with gopher tortoises down in southeast Georgia. I was a part of the University of Georgia Applied Wildlife Lab, and we worked with a lot of different species that were found on the coast through the Georgia Sea Turtle Center. So yeah, that's kind of where my focus was.
Yeah. So far, it sounds like you've done most of your work with turtles and tortoises. You want to talk about that at all?
Sure. Yeah. Gopher tortoises are kind of a iconic keystone species throughout the southeastern U.S. My project specifically, I was working with a mining company that does heavy mineral sand mining in Georgia. And part of that project involved doing reintroduction or relocation work, rather, for tortoises that would be on lands that were impacted by mining activities potentially. So my master's project came involved in the stage of where we were moving tortoises from one of the mining sites to a protected DNR owned site that was about an hour away from the mine site. And then I used GPS loggers to monitor their movements, radio tracking them with VHF transmitters, and did a lot of temperature work, trying to see how they were coping with being moved to a new location. So that's what a lot of my work revolved around with gopher tortoises, and I got to do a lot of other fun herp work working at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center as well. I like to say that my role when I was there for 2 years as an AmeriCorps member, before I even started my master's, was doing all of the non-sea turtle herp research on the coast. So I did a lot of radio tracking with eastern diamondback rattlesnakes, box turtles. We were head starting diamondback terrapins, and releasing those out into the salt marsh. So I have a bit of kind of a mixed bag of experience down in Georgia. So
yeah. So you currently work with the Turtle Survival Alliance. Do you want to go into detail about what that entails?
Yeah. So most of my work with the Turtle Survival Alliance right now is kind of volunteer and contract based work. I've done some projects with them, helping out grad students with GPS logger work. So creating these little devices that we could put on freshwater turtles in some of the Florida springs see where they're going, where they're nesting, and just learning more about the general spatial ecology, movement patterns, and stuff of some of those species down there. So I got involved with TSA through that, and then the opportunity came up to go to Madagascar, and I have since been involved with the big reintroduction project that they have for confiscated radiated tortoises in Madagascar. So that's my current main focus.
Yeah. I know you mentioned when we were texting before this that you had to keep some parts secret for security reasons. But want to go into more detail about your work with radiated tortoises in Madagascar?
Yeah, so basically the biggest issues affecting radiated tortoises in the wild are like habitat loss, obviously, but the black market trade is enormous for radiated tortoises. They have a hefty price tag in overseas markets, especially in Southeast Asia. You see a lot of ones that pop up in the trade in the U.S. are again quite valuable and highly coveted. However, they're regulated by CITES, so any international trade is pretty strictly regulated. So currently, the TSA has got a number of facilities spread out throughout Madagascar that work on triaging tortoises that have been seized in illegal wildlife trade operations, and they keep a lot of the information around that pretty close to the chest, just because it's very much a safety concern for having the animal stolen, and then also a lot of my friends and coworkers over there, it's a big thing for their safety as well to not give away too much information about the localities and exactly where we work. But we do have some great communities that we're working with, and they're really trying to build a foundation that will guide the future for over 20,000 of these tortoises that are currently in captivity to be reintroduced. So it's pretty exciting to be a part of it, and quite honored.
Yeah. So do you have any idea what the rough numbers of radiated tortoises are in the wild at the moment? And pile on to that, do you know, is there any indication of whether their populations are trending up or down or just holding steady at the moment?
So there haven't been any recent range-wide population monitoring done that I'm aware of. There's some line transect projects that can give regional estimates. The big issue with why radiated tortoises are considered critically endangered is the rate of decline that they've experienced. They were once one of the most abundant tortoises in the world and had populations that were in the tens of millions in Madagascar, and now it's into the tens of thousands that are believed to exist in their range currently. So just a massive decrease in the total number of tortoises still in the wild in Madagascar is kind of the reason for that.
Yeah. So when did this massive fall off happen to their population? Was that sometime in the past century, or could it be tracing it further back?
It's been within the last 30 to 40 years has been the majority of the population decline. So it's a very high priority for a number of turtle and tortoise conservation organizations. The AZA, so that's the Zoo and Aquarium organization in the U.S. that kind of spearheads a lot of the work over there. They are highly involved with the project, provide a lot of funding and support, which is pretty amazing. So, yeah.
So this, obviously losing tens of millions of tortoises in the span of a few decades. What was the main cause of that? Was that been habitat loss, or would the majority of that been due to the black market?
Well, I don't know that I would be comfortable saying exactly what caused it, but if you look at any aerial imagery from the country. There's just tons and tons of agricultural clearing of land. So the spiny forest in southern Madagascar is very important to radiated tortoises, and a lot of that gets cleared out every year for more and more agricultural uses. The communities raise a lot of invasive cactus species, Opuntia cactus, and they use the fruits for food, and then also the cactus pads they're able to feed to a lot of their cattle as a food source during really dry periods. And in the last several years, they've had some of the worst droughts in history going on over there. So it's a bit of this land conversion issue coupled with an explosive growth in the human population. So there's just way more people than there was even 20 years ago. So there's a lot of things coming into play. Certain regions of the country, the communities will actually use the tortoises as a food source, which is it's a very detrimental thing to be removing adult tortoises from any area, especially if you're trying to have a future generation to replace those adults that are being eaten every single year. It just creates a downward trend for the population. It's not good.
Yeah. You mentioned the southern spiny forest. Is that where radiated tortoises, was that kind of their stronghold? Or, I mean, we always hear Madagascar is a very highly varied island in terms of its ecology and environments. Are radiated tortoises more found in only one or a few different environments, or are they pretty much found across the entire island?
No, definitely not across the entire island. There's basically a mountain chain that runs kind of down the eastern central portion of Madagascar, and the east of that is much more, I guess you could say, like rainy. It gets a lot of precipitation each year. Has a lot of what you would consider more like rainforest species, but then the west and southwest in particular has a lot of more arid habitats, and that's kind of where you find these spiny forest habitats. So the radiated tortoises will use those, and then they're also out in some other kind of adjacent types of habitats, more coastal areas. Yeah.
Okay. So you just go over a few things about radiated tortoise biology, like their lifespan, how long does it take them to get to reproductive size, that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So radiated tortoises, there's not a whole lot known from their ecology in the wild. There's a lot of information that we're getting currently doing the research over there at the moment that I think is going to be very valuable to researchers in the future that are doing conservation work, as well as some of their land management practices that are going to help protect future generations of the tortoises. And they're like many tortoises, very slow growing. It takes many years to reach reproduction. I would be surprised under the conditions in the wild if they reach maturity before they're probably 15 years old. Just quite harsh conditions, and basically the rainy season is when they grow explosively for a couple months. If they get good rains, if the vegetation grows well, if not, they're just surviving. Basically, they're kind of getting by and putting on a little bit of growth each year as they can. So very slow growing.
Yeah. So what does the majority of their diet consist of in the wild?
A lot of different herbaceous vegetation is a key part of their natural wild diet, but like I said before, there's so much cactus in Madagascar, in that southern region, that is invasive. They seem to do really well actually eating the cactus fruits as well as the cactus pads. There's a lot of we call them octopus trees that have little shoots that are Lemurs love to eat them, and the tortoises also nibble on those grasses. They from my perspective, they seem to be quite a generalist of a tortoise species. There's a lot of species that have a little more specific dietary requirements, but I don't think radiated tortoises are that.
Yeah. And Madagascar doesn't really have any large native predators, so I imagine in a natural setting, they wouldn't have any natural predators, right?
Once they get to a certain size, they have very few natural predators. That when they're small hatchlings, pretty much anything can eat them. Just like all our tortoises in the U.S. here, go for a species. They're very likely to be picked up by crows and ravens. Various mesopredators will take them out. So once they get about the size of a basketball, there's not a lot that really will mess with them too much, other than people. So
yeah. So is there any way people at home could help support radiated tortoise conservation?
Being a supporter of the Turtle Survival Alliance is a great way to start, as well as many of the zoos throughout the country have projects that they donate conservation funds through. One of the biggest programs is the AZA SAFE program, and each year they award various research and conservation funds to projects that are working on specific species. So being a contributor to zoos through conservation donations and just visiting them is a great way to get involved. There's also a lot of volunteer opportunities with many different NGOs throughout the country, and that's a really great way to get involved as well if you have a strong interest in specific work that is going on for a species.
Gotcha. I'm trying to think of any other questions about radiated tortoises before I move on. Anything else you want to say about them before we move on?
I mean, they're an awesome tortoise. I'm
Can't dispute
that. Very grateful to get to work with those. There's a lot of different Madagascan tortoise species that are in kind of the same boat as having conservation issues that really need more attention. And just, I think radiated tortoises provide a good kind of a template for how to go about conserving species before they get to the insanely low levels that some of the other Malagasy tortoise species have already reached. So I think that's good for people to keep in mind elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how drastically their population has dropped when you think about it. Because I'm used to hearing about, as a guy who nerds out about crocodilians, I'm used to hearing stuff about, their populations were just slashed in the early part of the 20th century, and the only reason they haven't recovered yet is it just takes so long to recover, or there's not much funding or something like that. But this is like the first herb I've heard of that I can think off the top of my head that had such a drastic drop off in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's impressive. Scary. Definitely something to watch for with other species. I think as time moves on, we're going to see more and more issues like this.
Well, while we're on the subject of Malagasy tortoises, you want to talk about any of the other species at all?
So far, I've only gotten to see and find some of the spider tortoises that also co-occur in the same region. They're just awesome little tiny tortoise species that have this crazy ability to kind of bury down in the leaf litter and just disappear for months on end, and then only come back to the surface when conditions are just so. So it's, as somebody that studied a lot of turtles and tortoises in the U.S., it's pretty impressive to see some of the adaptations that Malagasy tortoises have had to develop in such harsh conditions. So, yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that. The place I was going to record at had to get changed at the last moment, so now I'm in my reptile shed, and it's a lot warmer than sweater temperature. So
Yeah, imagine.
yeah. So have you managed to do any herping on your own time in Madagascar?
A little bit, not a lot. For the most part, I've been over there 4 times now. Each trip's about a month long, and we tend to go to some of the same villages, same communities each trip. So it's really neat to see the forest in different times of the year. You see different species coming out, taking advantage of whatever the current conditions are. Like this last trip I was over there, we just had basically a tropical storm move through. Dropped a ton of rain in a short period of time, and the frogs just exploded. Like several different species that we had never seen on any of the other 3 trips came out, just deafening choruses and these little ephemeral wetlands that pop up. So seeing that's pretty awesome. I've gotten to see a number of boas, and so that's
I was
always
about to ask
exciting.
about those.
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting. Sanzinia is always one that gets my blood pumping when I'm over there. Try to find.
Yeah. Have you managed to find any of the native geckos as well? I imagine probably did, but
Yeah, we see quite a few of the geckos that occur in the south. I've only done one very short trip east of the capital city, Antananarivo. East of that is more rainforest type habitat. Got to see some very interesting herps there. I'm hoping on a future trip I'll get to spend some more time kind of recreational herping and seeing what all I can find in the north of the country as well. So.
yeah. So we mentioned you did work here in the southern United States and in Madagascar. Have you done anything in any other countries?
Yeah, I've actually gone down to Costa Rica, helped out with the American Crocodile Project, where we were putting satellite tags out. So that was a lot of fun. Back in 2017, I believe, we had a Disney Conservation Fund grant to put out some satellite tags. So had quite an experience going from catching American alligators to American crocs in Costa Rica. It's a whole different ball game. So
yeah,
getting drug upriver against the outgoing tide is pretty wild, but very large crocs. So
yeah. So what were some of your findings from that satellite survey?
so that I don't want to speak too much to that because we got a partner down there. I'm not sure exactly where he's at with his research, but it was very I guess you could say exciting for us to go there and see some different habitats versus like working in the Okefenokee swamp or on the coast of Georgia. Just very different habitats, getting an appreciation for a very different crocodilian, and had a lot of fun with that. So
yeah. So
and going out, we caught a lot of I believe it was spectacled caimans in some of the rainforest areas around where we were working with the crocs too, and seeing kind of how they partitioned off habitat differently.
yeah.
That was pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah.
You get a appreciation for a crocodilian using these tiny little puddles in the jungle versus big open wetlands or river systems
or deltas and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what the thing is. Spectacled caimans it's just a species that seems primed to get just broken up and exploded into like several different species. Seems like.
Oh, really? Okay.
It seems like it. I imagine if you range all the way from Costa Rica to Argentina.
So. Oh yeah, that sounds right for it. I wouldn't consider myself a crocodilian expert by any means, but I have been fortunate to work on some projects and get to be involved as far as being helping the field. So it's been really cool.
Yeah. So what are some other places you've done tortoise research and turtle research?
Turtle and tortoise research. I did a lot of spotted turtle work in North Carolina for Clemson University. They had a professor that had a grad student doing work up there. So I get to spend a lot of time tromping through moccasin swamps looking for spotted turtles and doing other herp surveys a lot. That was a lot of fun. I've done eastern indigo snake work down in Georgia, or in Florida, I mean, and a little bit in Georgia, not near as much there though. I've done volunteer surveys with TSA, the North American Freshwater Turtle Research Group does spring sampling trips where they go to Florida Springs, Texas Springs, and I believe they have a couple other sites in the Northeast as well doing turtle sampling events. And those are always a lot of fun to get involved with. So, yeah, those are some of the highlights.
Yeah, I definitely want to circle back to that indigo snake research because that's just such an iconic North American species.
Yeah, they were actually, I guess, probably the first real herp technician job that I took was with the Oriane Society. They had a project down at the Archbold Biological Station in Central Florida, South Central Florida, and my role in that project was to just follow these. We had about 20 indigos with transmitters in them. Follow them all over the Archbold Station, and there's like 3 or 4 counties that we had snakes in. So I was just driving constantly from site to site, hop out, go walk 4 or 5 miles, find the snake, try to get really interesting natural history observations. And anytime I would like find new indigos pretty regularly, especially in the cooler months down there. The mating season starts, so I'd find new snakes with my already telemetered snakes and then have to run them up to the University of Florida at Gainesville, get transmitter implant surgeries done on them, drive them back down, release them, and then just kind of adds to your radio tracking workload for the next several months. So
yeah, and indigos, they move around a lot, don't they?
Oh yeah, you will get a very different appreciation for indigos versus a lot of other snakes after radio tracking them. It's very impressive how far they can move, and in a day. Like, just I had big males that would make these like foraging movements of multiple kilometers in a day or 2 days, and you'd see them out near a lake shore, just cruising around hunting, and then the next day they would be back in some of the upland areas, hanging out around gopher tortoise burrows, doing kind of more typical indigo snake behaviors that you might be familiar with, kind of how they act more frequently in Georgia, some of the higher sandhills habitat systems. So yeah, they're very awesome snakes. Loved working with those.
Yeah, especially the fact that they don't even really constrict their prey; they just grab it and thrash it around, beat it up.
Oh yeah. I actually had one of our snakes that I was tracking. I think her name was Lucky, and she had caught a coach whip that was every bit of 7 feet long, and she was maybe 5.5 feet long, and she got the entire coach whip down and just had these huge bulging lumps in her body for like 3 weeks after she ate it. It was incredible. I was very impressed with that.
I'm impressed with the fact she managed to catch a coach whip.
Well, the coach whips will use those tortoise burrows as well. So I have a feeling it made the mistake of coming into a burrow she was already in, or she trailed it in there. Yeah, took advantage of the burrow to be able to grab a hold of it and just beat it up, like you said. So
yeah,
that's wild. So.
Yeah, they really do earn their genus name. So
yeah.
So what are some other interesting things you observed with indigos?
Probably, I think it was like my first, maybe second week on the job. I was radio tracking one in this hammock, and I was with my supervisor that was training me on the job, and we had tracked this snake to the base of this big live oak tree, and there was like no burrows anywhere near it that the snake could be in. So we're going around and around this tree, take the unhooking the Yagi antenna and kind of touching it around with the cord, trying to figure out a pinpoint location for it. And at some point, the cable just swung up, and when it got to the high point, it beeped really loud above us, and we both looked up, and about 25 feet up in this live oak tree, this indigo was just like looking over a limb down at us, seeing what was going on, and that was very unexpected. And after that, I think I only had two or three other encounters of thousands of times of radio tracking snakes where they were in trees and shrubs up off the ground, and never again that high up in a tree. So that kind of really stood out in my mind.
Yeah. It sounds like I need to tag along with the Orient Society sometime just to get my life for indigo.
Yeah. There's some great folks that work over there. Big fans of the Orient Society.
Yeah. So you mentioned you did work with you said spotted turtles, right?
Yep.
Want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, can a little bit. I was working with like I said, a graduate student. He was working on his master's project at the time, and that was on some basically pine tree plantations. They're very big on the coast of North Carolina and other states throughout the U.S. obviously as well. But one of the big issues with spotted turtles is the ephemeral wetlands that they prefer to be in typically have been drained in a lot of cases to be better productive for the pine trees that are grown there. So you get this channelization of habitat where instead of these like little pocket wetlands spread out across a landscape, you have just channels where the turtles are forced into these little ditches, which become great little turtle highways, but they also have the issue of predators can just move through, and it's a lot easier for predators to take advantage of turtle populations and systems like that. So we were seeing how their home ranges were basically affected by these ditch systems with our radio tracking on that project, and just getting some baseline data on some of those forests essentially for herp diversity. So
yeah. So how big do spotted turtles get, and what sort of predators do they have in the wild?
They're very small. They seem to top out at about 5 inches, 5.5, somewhere in there. A couple 100 grams is about as big as they get. And as far as predators, all sorts of stuff eat spotted turtles because they never really get out of that super vulnerable stage, right? Or not super vulnerable. Once they're probably 6-7 years old, 4 inches or so, their shell's quite hard, so it's a little more difficult. But raccoons have this ability to just like rip their head off and eat the limbs, and then they kind of toss them to the side and go try to find another live one. So raccoons are major predators. We saw herons, a lot of the wading birds will just walk up and down ditch systems and wipe out spotted turtle juveniles and hatchlings especially. So that was kind of a concerning thing that I saw doing that work. But yeah, very cool, beautiful little turtles, solid black, like onyx colored shells with yellow dots. It's kind of confusing why that coloration might be so good of camouflage until you're there at the time of the year where you have like pollen from trees landing on the water. You get these super tannic wetlands and they just disappear. It's incredible how those little yellow dots on a black background provide some excellent camouflage for spotted turtles. So
Yeah, I mean, if it didn't work, they would have been extinct by now.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you go over spotted turtle biology, just general biology at all?
Sure. They're considered a semi-aquatic species. So unlike a lot of box turtles that spend a lot of their time on land, except for maybe Gulf Coast box turtles or Cohelan box turtles. Those are kind of the outliers in that genus. But for the most part, spotted turtles spend a lot of their time in these shallow wetlands. They do make forays into kind of surrounding upland habitat and will bury down in the ground at the hottest parts of the year, in like an estivation type period. And then they are also very cold hardy. They have one of the largest, if not the largest, range of any of the North American turtles. They range up into Canada and can handle temps up there all the way down into Florida. So that's quite an impressive little species.
It sounds like they should be more popular in like herpetoculture then.
Yeah, I mean they're still very sought after in the herp trade. As far as a pet turtle goes, it doesn't get a lot more desirable. They don't get huge like a red-eared slider or something. Kind of the biggest thing with spotted turtles is making sure that they're not being poached, because that is a major concern for spotted turtle populations throughout their range. Just that desirability for the pet trade makes them an easy target. So a lot of states have really stepped up in the last several years and increased some of their state protections to prevent that, while at the same time there's quite a few spotted turtles available to anybody that's looking for captive bred spotted turtles legally. As long as you're not in a range state where they're protected, it's definitely possible for people to find them as pets without getting wild caught adults or juveniles. So
Yeah. As always, captive bred is preferable to wild caught. So
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So would you say the main threat to spotted turtle populations throughout their range would be habitat loss then?
I would say probably fragmentation is just as big of an issue. Habitat loss it's definitely up there. There's some major issues with roads just splitting up these little wetlands or even wetlands from upland sites. If there's a road and it's a tiny turtle, like most other herps, they don't move across the roads really fast, so they take a beating every year for that. So that's a major issue. And then the illegal collection for the pet trade in past years has been a very significant threat to certain populations, obviously. So the combination of those two things, yeah.
So you also did some ephemeral wetland research in Texas as well, right? Springs.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I messed up ephemeral with springs.
Oh, the springs. Yeah, I haven't actually made it over to any of the Texas sites for the spring sampling, but I have done a number of the Central Florida NAFTA research sites where we basically go to those sites with snorkeling gear, and it's a TSA sanctioned, permitted research project that employs a number of volunteers that want to come out and contribute to the work, where we kind of all jump in the water, look for turtles, catch the ones that we can, and then you generally have other volunteers in canoes paddling around, kind of collecting turtles from either a certain stretch of the river, the spring run, or in like a small lagoon part of the spring, and they try to keep them mostly together, and then they'll take them back to a central location, process them, take measurements, morphometrics, do pit tagging, getting weights, and then they all get either notched with a marginal notching code system or a pit tag, or sometimes both, and then they get released as close as possible to where they were captured again. And that's a lot of fun. You get to see kind of a different view of the Florida Springs than a lot of people get to see just floating down in an inner tube or something. So that's always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Always enjoy it when I can get down for that.
And so what sort of species do you find in these springs?
The most common species that are encountered are the pseudomies, so the big river cooter species, Florida red bellies, peninsula cooters, Swanee River cooters are some of my favorites to see just because of how large they are. Very impressive swimmers. So, also Florida soft shells are incredible to get to see some really large ones swimming around, as well as Florida snapping turtles. Lots of mud and musk turtle species as well use those springs. So
yeah, it's all fun games. Well, hopefully you don't have any accidental runs with any local gators, but
we see gators occasionally, but usually they keep to themselves. So
yeah. So have you done any snake research at all other than indigos?
I did eastern diamondback work on Jekyll Island, Georgia. So there it was another. I came to that project right after radio tracking indigo snakes. So my perception on how far certain snakes should or shouldn't move in a given amount of time was a little skewed after tracking indigos. But yeah, had a lot of fun radio tracking diamondbacks. So
yeah, you show up there and you're like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah, well, easy is relative on the Georgia coast. In the maritime forest, there's a lot of saw palmettos that are always a real joy to just bushwhack through those, looking for rattlesnakes. So yeah,
at least you don't have to hike 5 miles.
Yeah, yeah, not quite as crazy of movements with the eastern diamondbacks, but yeah, they have a great project going on there. That's monitoring the eastern diamondbacks on the island and radio tracking some for a long-term study. A lot of really interesting ecology works coming out of that region. So
yeah. So is it true that eastern diamondbacks will eat adult rabbits?
Marsh rabbits are occasionally part of their diet. Yeah. I've seen juvenile eastern diamondbacks catch like nearly grown squirrels, which is an impressive meal for a snake that's barely 2 feet long. And just the appreciation you get for a snake that can take down that size of prey and not explode or be incapable of swallowing the thing that's pretty crazy. Yeah, eastern diamondbacks were a lot of fun. And it's crazy to radio track them right to the beach as well and see them using some of the like where sand dunes are being scarped out by rising tides. They'll get under root masses and stuff, and just seeing them within feet of the ocean that's pretty wild. When kind of the typical thought a lot of people have is, all right, turkey oak, sandhills sort of habitat, but no, they will be right up next to the the incoming tide occasionally on these barrier islands, which is very cool to see.
Yeah. Is Jekyll Island the one with those feral horses on it?
You're thinking of Cumberland Island that has the feral horses, but yeah, Jekyll is just north of that. It's the southernmost Georgia island, and they're a state park that is funded entirely by visitors coming there. They have a causeway, the causeway is simultaneously a major terrapin conservation issue because the nesting female terrapins come up each spring and have a hard time getting across the road if they try to cross it, or just finding good habitat along the causeway to nest. So
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, another conservation issue.
Yeah. And you find all these stuff that I've always been dreamed of finding when I was a kid. So Indigos, Eastern Diamondbacks.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool species out there. I've been very, very fortunate to just kind of learn who the major players are for some of these species conservation, and get to know their projects and get involved with them through those sorts of means.
Yeah. So do you do any herping in your free time at all?
I haven't lately, because currently I'm in Wisconsin. We moved up here a couple of years ago. My fiance's wanted to be a little closer to her family after she finished grad school, and I was like, sure, that's fine. I've got the Madagascar project that kind of gives me my herping fix twice a year, so
Gives
I'm
you an excuse to get warm weather.
Yeah, and to leave in the middle of winter for a month and go hang out somewhere where it's nice and toasty. So
yeah, I'm in Ohio, so I know all about how herp deprived we are this time of year.
Yeah. I do enjoy the springs and the summers in Wisconsin. I've been pleasantly surprised by kind of the turtle diversity up here with blandings and wood turtles, and getting out to see some of the nesting areas that those species are found in. It's been really cool as well.
Yeah. So do you keep any herps of your own?
Yeah, I keep quite a few turtle species. I used to keep a lot of monitors, but when I went to college, or right after college, actually, I moved down to Florida, so I liquidated my monitor collection that I had at that point. Currently, just have turtles and tortoises for the most part. So.
Yeah. What sort of monitors did you have?
I kept a lot of Argus monitors. They were kind of my favorites. I also had some triple cross hybrids that were sand monitors mixed with Argus monitors, mixed with the I guess it's the Gouldi and Flavirufus complex sand monitors.
Okay.
So had those for a while. They were a lot of fun. Basically, like, Argus monitors are famous for doing the tripoding standing pose to kind of look around and some of the habitat that they're from. And then these hybrid three-way crosses were like a miniature version of that could still do the tripoding part way. Not as good as the Argus monitors, but they were still a lot of fun as far as a captive monitor. Didn't get crazy big like some of the other common species in the herp trade. So I like those a lot.
Yeah. So what sort of turtles and tortoises do you keep at the moment?
I have a number of Asian species are kind of my bigger focus right now. A lot of the Asian turtle species have been really impacted by what was called the Asian turtle crisis in the late 90s, early 2000s. A lot of Southeast Asian turtles were just being vacuumed up out of the forests in Asia and in other places of the world. They've been importing them over there for consumption as well as the pet trade. So the ones that I keep mostly are in the Marimis genus, and they are kind of basically pond turtles, but they're a pretty diverse genus. There's members all the way in Europe from the same genus of turtles, and I did a lot of work with sliders, so trachemes in Georgia. Got a big appreciation for those aquatic species, and the Marimis is kind of Southeast Asia's version of that, essentially. So I keep a lot of those. They're fun. Very inquisitive, the turtles.
Yeah. What's the name again? Is it black-breasted turtles? The really little ones with funny faces.
Yeah, so those are Spengler eye.
Yeah. I was visiting my mentor's place a few weeks ago. Yeah, recently. I don't know how recently, but yeah, I acquired a few of those, and those things are just so fun. Just being perched over the edge of the enclosure, giving you the big begging eyes when you walk by.
Yeah, their eyes light up when they see an earthworm, huh?
Yeah. So, I mean, East Asia in general is someplace I never really thought of for most of my life in terms of herbs, but the more I learn about it, the more of an interesting location it is. I mean, to a certain extent, it's basically just, to a certain extent, it's like a slightly different version of Eastern North America, but with more bamboo almost.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, and Southeast Asia also has the another genus Cora, and those are their version of box turtles, essentially. So, like our Terrapini North American box turtle genus, they have Cora, and a lot of those are some of the most brightly colored, impressive turtles around. So those are very, very pretty, very sought after, and again, for a number of those species, very little known about their ecology in the wild. Just not a lot of work has been done, and now populations for many of those species are so low that just finding enough to study them in the wild is a major problem, a hurdle. So a lot of the conservation work that's done with those species now is ex situ, so in captive assurance colonies. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you mentioned how a lot of turtles all over the world are being imported over into East Asia. I remember seeing this article, it was probably 3 or 4, I mean 5 years ago, it might have been pre-COVID, of an alligator snapping turtle showing up in the Amur River in between Russia and China.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few farms that are are keeping and breeding alligator snapping turtles now in China. So that's definitely a species that's made its way over there, highly sought after for a number of reasons.
I'm guessing mostly meat, but
there's quite a few people that like to keep them as pets as well. But yeah, meat makes sense.
Yeah, I have heard that North American turtles are kind of the big thing in Chinese herpetoculture.
Yeah, very, very sought after. Like our just common box turtles that are now not as common as they used to be, are very coveted in Asia as well, and in parts of Europe as well. So
yeah,
it's very kind of interesting to see what people are keeping in different parts of the world, and gives you a little different appreciation for kind of what's in our own backyards and taking note of it while the common things are still common, and how do we keep them common. So
yeah, this mentor figure I talked of, Chris Teeter of Crocodile Encounter. He's mentioned this to me many times before, but here in North America, we always like, when it comes to crocodiles, we're always like, oh, Cuban crocs or salties or Niles, yada yada yada. And he's like, all my buddies overseas, what they want is American alligators. So that's the thing they covet the most.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting the different perspectives you get talking to people from different parts of the world. So
yeah.
The funny thing was actually with another story from Madagascar, working with the radiated tortoises there, you see so many of them, or we were, obviously, because we're in good areas and doing a lot of work with some of the captive colonies. But I think on our first trip, I was nearing the 5-week mark of being over there, and we drove past this puddle in the middle of the road, and I saw a little head drop down, and I was like, "Stop the car! We gotta go back and see what turtle that is, because I haven't seen a turtle over here in the last month. Basically, it's just all radiated tortoises, which anywhere else that's super coveted. One of our friends that's working over there wades out into this little puddle, catches it, and it's an African mud turtle, one of the side neck species, and they're invasive in Madagascar. So not a great thing. But I was honestly I guess unreasonably excited over a little African mud turtle that like every Petco in America sells for like $30.
Yeah.
But you just get in this like crazy state of mind, so spoiled seeing these other awesome, beautiful radiated tortoises all over the place, and then you're like, oh, now I can appreciate this little bland brown water turtle for what it is. So it's interesting.
Just here, you're like, oh, lifer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are there any particular species or locations you ever want to research in your life? They haven't got to yet.
Yeah, my list grows every time I go somewhere else. I'm really looking forward to getting over to Australia, not just for the monitors, but turtle diversity in Australia is pretty impressive. I'm looking to do some work over there eventually, and I'd love to get to South America as well. See some of the riverine turtle species that live down there. I'm not terribly picky. I would like to go to a lot of places and do more projects than I have time to do, honestly. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there any other things you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I don't think so. It feels like we covered a lot, just kind of all over the place. But yeah, I appreciate you for having me on here and chatting. It's been fun.
So in closing, go support the Turtle Survival Alliance, and other than that, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Nate.
My pleasure.